In medieval Rus, political authority and spiritual responsibility were often intertwined. Princes were not merely rulers of territory, but guardians of a people whose faith shaped public and private life alike. Within this context emerged Roman of Uglich, remembered not for conquest, but for paternal governance. Born on October 1, 1235, the son of Prince Vladimir and Princess Fotina of Uglich, Roman inherited both noble lineage and ecclesial heritage. He was also the nephew of Saint Basil of Rostov, linking him to a family already marked by Christian witness. When loss struck his household and succession fell upon him at a young age, Roman accepted responsibility not as privilege, but as burden. His reign would reveal a model of leadership grounded in mercy, discipline, and daily devotion. Roman's path to rule was marked by early loss. His father reposed in 1248, and years later, in 1261, his older brother Andrew also died. At 26 years of age, Roman assumed governance of Uglich, stepping into responsibility shaped by both grief and duty. The principality he inherited required stability rather than ambition. Instead of pursuing territorial expansion, Roman directed his attention inward, seeking to strengthen the life of his people through order, justice, and attentiveness to their material and spiritual needs. Chroniclers remembered him as a father to his subjects. The description was not rhetorical flourish. It reflected a pattern of rule characterized by accessibility and concern for the vulnerable within his domain. He established a poor house, providing shelter and sustenance for the destitute who came from various regions seeking relief. In an age where poverty often led to abandonment, this initiative revealed deliberate commitment to mercy. Beyond direct charity, Roman invested in the ecclesial life of the principality. Over the course of his rule, 15 churches were built under his patronage, shaping the spiritual landscape of Uglich through visible dedication to worship. His presence at divine services was regular and unwavering. Participation was not ceremonial obligation. It expressed conviction that governance required continual reference to God's judgment and mercy. He frequently conversed with pious monks, seeking counsel and spiritual clarity. These exchanges reinforced his awareness that princely authority remained subordinate to divine law and ascetic wisdom. In these habits, Roman united civic leadership with spiritual vigilance. His reign did not separate palace from church, but held both within a unified understanding of responsibility. Thus, his early years as prince established a pattern of governance rooted in service rather than dominance. The foundation of his sanctity lay not in dramatic acts, but in sustained fidelity to mercy and worship. Roman's charitable works did not function as isolated gestures, but as structured commitment. The poorhouse he established became a visible sign that princely authority carried obligation toward those without protection or inheritance. The destitute who came to Uglich found more than temporary relief. By welcoming them into organized care, Roman shaped a social environment where mercy was institutional rather than occasional. The 15 churches erected within his principality altered not only architecture, but rhythm of life. Their bells marked time, gathered communities, and anchored daily existence in liturgical remembrance. Roman's consistent presence at divine services testified that political leadership did not exempt him from spiritual discipline. He stood among his people in prayer, conscious that earthly authority remained accountable before God. His conversations with monks deepened this orientation. In seeking their counsel, he demonstrated that governance required interior correction and humility. The prince did not presume himself self-sufficient. Such dialogue with ascetics created continuity between the monastery and the court. Spiritual wisdom influenced civic policy, reinforcing the conviction that justice must be informed by prayer. These practices gradually formed Romang's reputation as a ruler who preferred righteousness to acclaim. His governance did not rely upon spectacle or military triumph, but upon stability shaped by devotion. The Principality of Uglich, situated along the Volga, became known less for conflict and more for ordered life under a ruler attentive to both altar and marketplace. Yet his path would soon shift again. Personal loss would redirect his energy away from even-measured civic engagement toward deeper ascetic resolve. In 1280, the death of his wife marked a decisive turning point in Romang's life. The loss did not lead him into withdrawal from responsibility, yet it redirected his heart toward intensified spiritual discipline. Freed from the obligations of marital life, he devoted himself more fully to fasting, extended prayer, and works of righteousness. His ascetic commitment grew within the framework of princely duty rather than replacing it. What had already been structured governance now took on deeper interior character. Charity was no longer only policy. It became personal offering, shaped by grief and hope in eternal life. During these years, he founded the city of Romanov on the high bank of the Volga, a project reflecting both administrative foresight and desire to strengthen the region's stability. The foundation of Romanov did not contradict his ascetic resolve. It demonstrated that contemplative discipline could coexist with constructive civic action when ordered toward service rather than ambition. Even as he expanded settlement and ecclesial presence, he preserved habits of restraint. Fasting and prayer structured his days, reinforcing awareness of mortality and divine judgment. His governance thus matured into a synthesis of authority and renunciation. Power was exercised without attachment, and responsibility carried without display. By the time his earthly course neared completion, Romang had embodied a model of rulership rare in any age: disciplined, charitable, and interiorly vigilant. On February 3, 1285, he reposed peacefully and was buried in the Church of the Transfiguration in Uglich, leaving behind a principality shaped by mercy and prayer. More than 2 centuries after his repose, in 1486, the relics of Prince Roman were uncovered and found to be incorrupt. In medieval Rus, such preservation was understood as sign of divine favor and confirmation of a life lived in righteousness before God. The discovery stirred reverence among the faithful of Uglich. His relics were transferred to the newly built Cathedral of the Transfiguration, reinforcing the connection between his earthly governance and the spiritual life he had cultivated. Reports of miracles associated with his relics gradually spread. The memory of his charity and devotion, already preserved in local tradition, gained renewed strength through testimony of intercession and healing. In 1595, with the blessing of Patriarch Job, the relics were formally examined in light of these reports. Metropolitan Hermogenes, who would later become Patriarch, bore witness to the signs attributed to the Holy Prince. Following this recognition, Romang was numbered among the saints of the Church. His glorification did not introduce a new reputation, but confirmed publicly what had long been honored in regional devotion. The prince who had governed his father now stood within liturgical memory as right-believing ruler. His example bridged civic responsibility and spiritual fidelity, offering model for those entrusted with authority. Yet history did not preserve his relics without interruption. In 1609, during an invasion by Polish forces, the church housing his relics was burned, and they were consumed in the fire. The destruction did not erase his memory. On the contrary, the loss deepened awareness that sanctity does not depend upon physical preservation alone. but upon the witness carried forward in prayer and remembrance. Thus Saint Roman of Uglich remains in the Church's consciousness as prince and ascetic, builder and benefactor, whose incorruption testified to inner discipline long before his relics were revealed to the faithful. Saint Roman of Uglich demonstrates that sanctity is not confined to monastery walls or martyr's arena. Within the responsibilities of governance, he united mercy with authority, discipline with compassion, and public duty with interior prayer. His life affirms that leadership grounded in humility can shape both city and conscience. If reflections like this deepen your understanding of how faith can transform even the structures of power into instruments of righteousness, you are warmly invited to subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you help preserve the memory of those whose quiet fidelity continues to instruct generations.